Can everybody see this? Can everybody? Yeah? Okay. I don't know how much I'm going to use it. Depends how the time goes. Depends how much space I get to do bits and pieces. But anyway, I just want to start off by praying. Lord, we just thank you for this series that we're in at the moment, where we get to look at you. You are such an amazing person. You're worthy of our attention. The closer we get to you, the bigger you seem. And the more amazing you seem. Some people just diminish as you get closer to them. You have a sort of hero's view of them, and then as you get closer, you see that they are flawed. But the closer we get to you, the more we look at you, the more amazing you are. Amen. So, let me ask you something. Have you ever wanted a fresh start? Have you ever wanted to have like everything just start all over again? And you're making scrambled egg or something, and you get a bit of shell in there, and you're trying to fish it out and everything, and you just think, oh, if these weren't the only eggs I had, I'd just throw it all away and start again. And life can be like that, can't it? You think, I'd love to have a fresh start. I'd love that the past was not my past, and that I didn't have to live with the consequences of that past. That I didn't have to inherit my mother's nose and my father's bad temper. Wouldn't that be wonderful if I could just have an absolutely fresh start? Well, the story that we have of the birth of Jesus, which is the subject we're looking at this week, is told in such a way as to reconcile those two things. The fact that we all come from somewhere, and yet we are desperately needing a fresh start. And God, in his amazing power and ability to sort things out, just as we've been praying this morning, we've been praying for the family members, and we all think about, if only I had said that, if only we hadn't gone there, if only that choice hadn't been made, and whatever. Actually, the way God works it is he can bring all those things to a beautiful conclusion and give you an absolutely fresh start. That's an astonishing thing that only God can do. And when we look at the story of the birth of Jesus, it's told in such a way to say, this is what's happening. This is what's happening. You get a new beginning, a new creation, in fact, and a recognition that we actually all come from somewhere. So we're in the beginning of Matthew. And those of you who've been reading this, we've done a reading plan for this term. So you'd be on week 2 here, birth. And Matthew 1, 18 to 25 would have been one of the passages you might have read. Not a big passage, they're not great screeds you've got to read through. Just give yourself a little bit of time in the week just to read those passages and let yourself meditate on those things. So we're in Matthew chapter 1. And Matthew chapter 1 starts, before the bit you'd have read, with a list of names, a list of people. And what Matthew's saying is that Jesus doesn't appear from nowhere. He's not some sort of spaceman who just suddenly appears. Actually, there's a story of how he comes to being. And it's Israel's story. He tells the story of starting with Abraham, who was the father of the Jewish nation. Abraham was the father of Isaac the father of Jacob. And in Matthew's gospel, he structures it in a very careful way he misses out some people, and he includes some other people that you might not have thought of. Various things you should notice about this list of names. One is he puts a lot of women in there. Amen. He says, this isn't the guy who's just turning up for the men. This is a guy who's turning up for the women. So it's male and female. I am going to fall over that at some point in this one. That's the comedy turn later on. It's not just the main people, it's the brothers of those main characters. He includes not just the Jews, but there are Gentiles included in the story. So that not just the people who you might think have been narrowed down to form this particular family and God's interested in them. He's saying, actually, this baby who is going to be born is going to be the solution to Gentiles as well, and Gentile women in that story. So this is a baby who's born to solve the problems of the entire world, the entire human race. And he finishes up with verse 17. So all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations, and from David to the deportation to Babylon, 14 generations, and from the deportation to Babylon to the Christ, 14 generations. Okay. Why don't we write that down? Okay. So we've got from Abraham to David to what we often call the exile, if we're not in the ESV. And then we've got Jesus. And saying 14 generations between each one. Now, if you read actually the names included in that, you go, Matthew, you fudge that a bit. Actually, the numbers don't quite work out. You can only do 14 there if you count one into this one and 14 like that. So we've got to pay attention to that, brothers and sisters. Why is he saying there's 14 between each? Well, it's 7 plus 7, 7 plus 7, and then 7 plus 7, and then Jesus. So what this is, he's saying we've got 7 generations is a week of generations. It's a week of generations. So we've got 7 weeks, 6 weeks of generations, and then Jesus comes, the start of a new week. Isn't that clever? Sue's impressed, which is great because she just had a day of partying yesterday. So God bless her. Happy birthday, mate. So 7 plus 7 plus 7 plus 7. So Jesus starts a new week. He sums up the whole of humanity and he begins a new week. It's a Jubilee week. It's a new start for humanity. The day of rest. There's a whole load of stuff. If we go into all that, I'm going to be here till Christmas. And actually, this is the frustrating thing about this series. There's just like so much in each week. We could do a whole term on the birth of Jesus. And I'm going to miss out so much. Frustrating or what? However, so I'm keeping it to 2 points, but they're pretty long points. Okay, so recognize that Matthew's telling a story that Jesus comes from somewhere. He's the summation of this problem humanity, who are the problem of the world. Everything about the world that is a mess is because of you and me. That's the way it is. This fractured world, this mess of a world is because of humanity. And yet Jesus comes at the end of this story of how, including all these messy people. This isn't a list of heroes. Even some of the people who've got missed out of this list would have considered themselves, why did I get missed out? I was a legend. In my time, I was important. I was a king. I really shaped this thing. And Matthew goes, wipes them out. But others, you might think, well, we'll just keep them quiet. You know, we don't mention Uncle Tom or whatever. He brings them in. So whatever your background, whatever your backstory, you are included. There is an opportunity in the story of the birth of Jesus to include you. Whatever mess you've made of your life, whatever mess you come from, whether your father was a complete disaster, whether your mother was horrific, whether they came from long lines of mess, Jesus is the answer to your problem. Do not fear. Do not think my life, my background, my everything is way beyond it. I'm never going to achieve anything. There's no place for me here. Jesus would never accept me. Jesus encompasses you and draws you in. So do not fear. This is the story of the arrival of the Son of God as the son of Abraham, the son of David, the son of the exile. Good news. So, we come to Matthew chapter 1, verse 18. About the birth, the conception and birth of Jesus. But he doesn't just come from humanity. That's the good news. Because he comes as a fresh start. He's not just a man. He's not a man who appears and has a great idea, who gets a kind of special calling, some visitation from something or some angel or whatever, and realizes that he could change the world through this special revelation that he's got. He's not a man who comes and receives the Spirit on him, like a Samson or a David even. This is an exceptional God-man. He is the God-man. Now, the birth of Jesus Christ took place in this way. When his mother, Mary, had been betrothed to Joseph, before they came together, she was found to be with child from the Holy Spirit. This is a fresh start, which is incredibly important. I'm just going to read you a quote from Peter Lightheart's commentary on Matthew. The virgin birth is thus a sign of God's new initiative, of God's new creation, which begins with the creation of the new man, Jesus. Our salvation does not come, it cannot come from inside humanity. We are not capable of saving ourselves. Hear that again. We are not capable of saving ourselves. God has to come in from the outside if we are going to be saved. We cannot repair the damage of sin or construct a new creation by our own initiative, by our own reproduction, by our own expertise or power. The virgin birth passes a judgment on all human efforts at self-salvation. All our prideful pretense that we can put the world right through political or technological or educational means. If the world is going to be put right, God must enter the world from the outside, because everything that comes from within humanity is corrupted and weak. And if we're honest with ourselves, we know that. We know that. Those of us who've tried to fix our lives, those of us who've tried to create a new start, think, well, if I got a new job, if I got a new hobby, if I got a new wife, if I got a new whatever, we realize that the problem is us. Wherever we go, we take us with us. And so the solution that God has for humanity is to come himself in person. And this, as Matthew goes on to describe this event, in verse 22, he says, all this took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel. And you think, oh, that's a very familiar passage from our Christmas service and whatever like that. And I'm just going to take you in there a little bit, because this is a significant verse that he picks up. It's not like he's gone through his concordance and found references to virgins in the Old Testament. Let's see whether, oh my goodness, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel. This is a story from the beginning of Isaiah. And last week we looked at Isaiah chapter 6. This week we're going to look at Isaiah chapter 7. And it's a story, if I can find my bit, there we go. I'm on the other side of that. It's a story at the beginning of Isaiah of how God defeats the enemies of Judah. So it's a story of God defeating enemies. And God gives the king of Israel a sign that of a virgin, possibly a young girl, is born, has a baby. And that's meant to be a sign to him that God is with them and is going to defeat their enemies. I'm going to give you a little bit of a background of that story. Yeah, I've got time. This is what this is essential for. Okay, here we go. Here we've got Israel. A little bit up there from Mount Carmel, right? And see there, and then see here, okay? This is Israel. And Israel is divided into two parts. We've got the northern kingdom, which is known as Israel. And the capital is Samaria. And the southern kingdom, which is called Judah, with Jerusalem there. Forgive those of you who are real fussy geographers, you're going to be horrified by that. Up here we've got Syria. In fact, Syria is sort of over this way. Damascus is the capital there. And what's happening is the Assyrians, are threatening Syria and Israel at this time. They're the local powers. Oh, you got the camera on it. That's clever. Hadn't thought about that. Okay, you with me? Okay, you enjoying the geography lesson? I'll do the colouring in later. Okay. So, the issue is that the Syrians and Israel are feeling threatened by the Assyrians, and so they form an alliance together. Israel are the 10 tribes that have gone away from God. They've set up their own worship center in Samaria, and they're apostate. They've gone away from God. Judah has its own problems, but actually because it's the tribe of David and the promise of God to David that they would be a faithful, that he would preserve them as a line. Although there's plenty of sin going on down in Judah, they actually haven't given themselves over to the same sins as the northern kingdom. Okay? You with us still? Right. Okay, so these two form an alliance together and they want Judah on their side. So they send a message to Ahaz, who's the king of Judah and Jerusalem. Not a great king, not a God-fearing, godly man. However, he says, I don't want to go into alliance with you. And so the king of Syria and the king of Israel come down to invade Judah in order to get rid of Ahaz and set their own king up in his place. Okay? And so Isaiah goes to Ahaz and says, don't worry about them, don't be threatened by them, because I am going to defeat your enemies. And the sign I'm going to give, and God is going to give you a sign. And Ahaz says, I don't want a sign. I don't need a sign. I may worship other gods, I may be an absolute beep, but I'm so spiritual, I don't need a sign. I wouldn't test God with a sign. Even when God says, I'm going to give you a sign, he rejects it. And Isaiah says, you're going to get a sign anyway. A virgin will be with child. And, okay? And so the story that Matthew is picking up there, he hasn't, like I say, he hasn't just delved into the backstory of Israel and thought, let's find a story about a young girl having a baby. He's saying, this is a story of God delivering you from your enemies. This is what's coming for Israel, is that he's going to deliver them from their enemies. This whole backstory, the enemies are going to be defeated. Now, we know that in life, our threat is not Syria and Israel coming upon us. That's not our threat. Our problem, the enemies that we face, are multitudes. If I went around this room and we said, what are the problems you face? Are all sorts of multiple different little things. But we know at the root of every single one of them is our sin, which is the thing that undermines us, threatens us, destroys the hopes and promises that we have. That we need somebody to deal with sin and Satan who's behind that. And so what God is doing in the arrival of Jesus, he's bringing somebody who can beat that, who can beat your enemies, who can defeat the bad habits and bad patterns and bad choices that come from a place deep, deep down within. You keep snipping off the fruits as they appear, but there's something growing up inside that just keeps producing these things. You need somebody who's going to come and deal with that, and that is what God is going to do for you. He's going to come and deliver you from your enemies. They're not enemies out there, they're enemies in here. And that's what you desperately need. But, to continue the story, okay? This is because Jesus arrives not just with a solution to their problems. The sign to Ahaz is going to be his downfall as well. Because if you accept the sign, like Israel, if they accept Jesus, they get the good side of it. If they do not accept him, then they're in trouble. Because Ahaz doesn't accept the sign, and he goes off to Assyria, and he goes and he takes gifts from the temple, takes up bits of the temple, says, well, what a wonderful thing we have going on here. Could you come and defend us? Could you come and make it and sort things out for us? He doesn't accept that God is his solution. He thinks he can work it out by political means. And so that's going to be the story that happens through the life of Jesus. As we track his story through Matthew's gospel, we're going to see the choice that Israel makes of rejecting Jesus, a rejection of that sign, is that they fall. Their only hope was to accept this little baby born in a out of the way place. And there's so much more I could talk about that. But the birth of Jesus, the conception and birth of Jesus, is the pivotal moment in world history. Everything before this moment looks towards it. Everything going on from it, everything that comes after it, only makes sense in the light of it. Doesn't matter what culture, what religion you were born into. The God who made everything, the God who created the universe, everything seen and unseen, was nourished from a woman's placenta. That God who holds everything in place, even every cell in your body, every atom in your body, is held together by his word and his power. That God is placed into a feeding trough in Palestine. He's willing to have his nappy changed and wait for his mother to feed him some milk. feel that incredible sense that this incredible God that we looked at last week in this, his train filling the temple, this awesome God who is beyond anything we can comprehend in our mind, holding all things together by the word of his power, limiting himself into this body, into this being that is so weak and so vulnerable. Becoming one cell, dividing into 2, into 4, into 8, into 16. Being created in his mother's womb, brought together into a body with legs and arms. How astonishing it is. And he does it because he loved us. You've got to understand the story. It's a story of love. It's a story of the heart of our Creator God who reaches out into his creation, a Father who so loves his world, so loved us. He did it because we needed him. We needed him to give us a fresh start and to redeem our stories. You need to have a piece of him. In a minute, we're going to take bread and wine together. Jesus said, this bread that you take as part of this meal is my body. And this wine that you drink, or this grape juice in our case, is my blood. If you want a piece of me, if you want a piece of that, then that's what you take. You take the bread and you take the cup. And you say, I'm going to be included. If you want a fresh start in your life, if you want to start again, if you want all the past wiped away, made as if it had never happened, that kind of level of fresh start, oh, how glorious that would be. Pete, you're just giving me too much of a hope there. It can't be like that. Well, the good news is, it'll be like that, and he will sort out your backstory. He will make all those mistakes, all those things that you thought, oh, if only I'd not done that. If only I'd done better in that situation. If only I'd just kept my mouth shut. If only I'd kept my hand in my pocket. If only I'd just not done that. He's going to restore and redeem all those things such that as we go forward into the future, into all you've got for eternity, that life that God is going to give you in the resurrection, that all those things, and you look back and say, wow, how did you sort all that out? I thought I'd irrevocably destroyed that relationship. I thought I'd completely screwed up. And yet somehow you've turned it round into something beautiful. When you take the bread and you drink the cup, you take a piece of him. You say, I will accept the sign. I'm not like Ahaz down in Judah, saying, I'm going to go for other things. You're saying, I'm going to recognize this little baby is the answer to my problems. Now, this may be the first time you've done that. This may be your first Sunday here. This may be you strolled in here thinking there was something interesting going on up here. Well, there is for you. There really is. This could be the start of a whole new thing. You could have been coming for weeks. You could be coming for years. This is an opportunity for you to start again, to take a fresh start, to receive the sign of the virgin birth. This wonderful thing, God made flesh. So the band could come up. We're going to take bread and wine. No, I don't. There are stations all around. Go make sure people are, if you're not, make sure we look after each other. We're a family together, okay? Go and grab it and just take a moment to receive Jesus again. If this is your first time of doing this, that's great. You need to talk to somebody. You need to make more sense of it than just this moment. If you don't want to receive the sign, don't take it. This isn't for you. There isn't enough food here to get you through to dinner time. Okay. But there is enough food here to get you through eternity, should you choose to accept the sign. Okay? Jesus, I pray for your presence amongst us. Thank you that you love to be here. You're here in this bread and this wine. You're here by your Spirit. And we receive you again, Lord Jesus. We thank you for humbling yourself, both in the womb and in the feeding trough and ultimately on the cross, to humble yourself just for us. Oh, Jesus. You are so amazing, so beautiful, so wonderful. We worship you. We give you ourselves again, wholeheartedly.